The voice cracked through the morning glare like a whip. "License and registration now!" Officer Harlan Cole leaned toward the driver's window, one hand resting near his holster, the other hovering by his radio. His breath carried the scent of coffee and something heavier. Around him, horns blared on the interstate, while sunlight glinted off windshields like fragments of a truth he was not ready to face. The woman behind the wheel did not flinch. Her composure unsettled him more than any weapon could have. Elena Rivera, director of the FBI's Los Angeles field office, had begun her morning as she always did. She kissed her daughter Isabel on the forehead before school, reminded her not to forget her debate notes, and stepped into the familiar rhythm of traffic that defined the city's dawn. She valued that order. The steady flow of headlights and brake lights, the radio chatter of agents checking in, the sound of her daughter's laughter through the speaker. Then came the flash. Blue and red lights bounced across the mirror. The metallic wail of a siren cut through the sunlight. For a brief moment, she thought it must be for someone else. Her signals had been clean, her speed steady, but the patrol car did not pass. It slowed and slid in behind her like a shadow gaining purpose. Harlan Cole had begun his shift earlier that morning. The remnants of the night before still clung to his breath, masked only by bitter coffee. He told himself he was not impaired, merely steadying his nerves. Divorce papers waited unsigned on his counter. Bills were late. His father's voice echoed from memory. "Never trust anyone who does not look like you." That voice had shaped him more than he cared to admit. He had seen her car, a black sedan with government plates, a late signal between lanes. That was all the reason he needed. His finger tapped the light switch, his thoughts hardening before he even saw the driver's face. Elena eased her car to the shoulder near the exit, tires crunching against loose gravel. Sunlight spilled across the dashboard, that blinding orange that always stirred memories of her father. The same morning, years earlier in Tijuana, when a police bullet took him away. She breathed once, slow and deep, then lowered her window. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" Her tone was even, not defensive. Years in law enforcement had taught her that calm was its own kind of strength. Harlan did not answer right away. He spotted her identification resting on the console, saw the small gold badge beside it, and felt his chest tighten. "Failed to signal a lane change," he muttered, still scanning the car. Elena pressed a small button on her watch. The hidden recorder activated. "For the record, please state your badge number." That request landed like an insult. His father's words returned about mouthy women, about respect, about control. Harlan's jaw twitched. "Ma'am, don't start playing lawyer. It's early, and I don't need attitude." She turned her head slightly, sunlight catching the scar on her wrist from a field raid years before. "I'm not playing anything. You pulled over a federal vehicle without probable cause." The air between them thickened. Drivers slowed to watch, cell phones lifting discreetly through half-rolled windows. Across the divider, Mateo Santos, a young trucker, leaned forward in his cab. He saw the officer's stance, the woman's composure, and something in his gut told him to hit record. His phone began streaming live. The caption was simple: "Traffic stop on the interstate. Something feels wrong." Harlan slammed his door and walked toward her front bumper. "Step out of the car." "I don't think that's necessary." The shout carried across the traffic jam. A nearby driver flinched. Elena kept her hands visible on the wheel. "Officer, I am advising you that this interaction is being recorded under federal authority." He smirked, one hand brushing the butt of his pistol. "You think that scares me?" "You people always think." She cut him off gently. "You people." That moment, that pause, stretched too long. Harlan's face flushed, the sun cutting across his eyes. He pulled the weapon free, pointing it downward but trembling. "Get out of the car." Someone screamed from another vehicle. Tires screeched. The city noise faded, leaving only heartbeats and sunlight. Then came the sound. A crack like the sky splitting open. He had fired upward, a warning shot that echoed down the freeway. Birds scattered into the orange haze. For one terrifying instant, it was as if the whole city stopped breathing. Elena did not move. Her voice, calm but firm, sliced through the silence. "You just discharged a weapon without cause. This scene is now a federal matter." Her tone jolted him, cold authority wrapped in restraint. His grip faltered. He realized too late that the badge glinting from her dashboard was not local. It read, "Federal Bureau of Investigation. Director, Los Angeles Field Office." The thought hit him harder than any recoil. Around them, traffic lights continued to blink. Mateo's phone kept streaming. Within minutes, the clip would reach millions, an officer shaking before a Latina woman who had not even raised her voice. Elena leaned back, pulse steady but heavy. In her mind flashed her father's last morning. The shouts, the gun, the glare of the sun. She whispered under her breath, "Not again." A radio crackled from her dash. "Director Rivera, this is command. Are you safe?" She hesitated before answering. For now, Harlan took a step back, eyes darting between her badge and the growing ring of cameras. He holstered his gun, voice cracking. "Stay in the vehicle. Backup's coming." Elena did not reply. She simply folded her hands, palms steady in the same light that had once blinded her as a child. The sun climbed higher, painting the freeway in gold and glass. Somewhere behind them, sirens began to rise, a chorus of judgment carried on the morning air. That was how it began. One stop, one trigger, one woman who refused to tremble. And the light of Los Angeles, for the first time in years, showed everything it had been trying to hide. The freeway had never seemed so still. Even the wind paused, carrying the echo of that gunshot along the concrete walls, like a warning that morning itself had gone too far. Officer Harlan Cole stood frozen beside his patrol car, sweat streaking down his temples, the gun still trembling in his hand. His mind scrambled for justification, anything to make sense of what he had just done. He had fired into the sky, but the world below now seemed aimed squarely at him. Elena Rivera sat motionless behind the wheel, her breathing shallow but controlled. She had faced armed suspects, cartel figures, and domestic terror briefings. None of that compared to this. A uniformed man with authority and fear tangled inside him, his judgment unraveling beneath the morning sun. She lowered her window again, voice calm and measured. "Officer, for the record, please confirm your name and badge number." Harlan blinked, disoriented. The words barely registered. "You think this is a game? Latinas always weaving through traffic like they own it," he muttered, too low for most to hear. Yet the FBI recorder on her wrist caught every syllable. In the lane beside them, Mateo Santos clenched his phone tighter. His live stream spread rapidly, comments flooding in from across the country. Cars idled, some reversed off the shoulder. The golden glare turned harsh, painting every face with heat and tension. Elena kept her voice steady. "I'm asking again. Officer, state your cause for this stop." Harlan slammed his door so hard, the sound cut through the air like a verdict. "Didn't signal. That's cause enough." He paced in front of her car, one hand on his belt, the other twitching near his holster. His pulse thudded in his ears. The crowd of trapped commuters had become a mirror of judgment, eyes, phones, voices he could not silence. "You discharged your weapon," she said evenly. "You need to call it in." He stopped walking. "Don't tell me what I need to do." Elena felt a strange stillness in her chest, the kind that came before important decisions. "I'm not telling you as a civilian," she replied quietly. "I'm telling you as a federal officer." That line shattered something in him. "Federal what?" His voice broke into a laugh that held no humor. "You think dropping a title changes what I saw? You were nervous, reaching for something. Could have been a gun. There was no gun. I decide what's a threat on this road." He turned away, radio crackling, yet his hand hesitated before pressing the mic. In that hesitation, Elena caught a glimpse of the man behind the badge. Tired, angry, ashamed of things he had never said aloud. Her phone buzzed. It was Isabel calling from school. For an instant she thought of ignoring it. Then instinct took over. She answered through the car speaker, keeping her eyes on Harlan. "Hey, honey, I'm fine. Stay in class, okay?" "What happened, Mom?" "People are saying there's a shooting on the freeway." Her throat tightened. "It's just noise, Mija. Stay safe. I'll call you soon." Harlan's gaze snapped toward the sound of the young voice. "Turn that off." "It's my daughter." I said off. He struck her hood with an open palm. The metallic clang drew gasps from nearby cars. Mateo's camera caught it in perfect sunlight. Elena inhaled deeply. "You're being recorded, officer." "Don't care. Don't need cause this early." He barked the phrase like a shield. That sentence would echo across the internet within minutes. It would become a headline, a chant, a question of what need meant when sunlight exposed everything. Traffic reporters began breaking into live coverage. Helicopters hovered, their shadows crossing the freeway like vultures. Someone shouted from another car, "You're on live, man! Chill out." But Harlan only grew more rigid, cornered by his own fear. He turned back toward Elena, voice cracking. "Step out now." "I will not." "Then you're resisting." "Resisting what?" "A false stop." Their words collided like metal, each one striking harder than the last. The line between law and fear blurred with every syllable. Elena looked through her windshield at the rising sun. She remembered her father again, the way morning light had hit the street outside their small house in Tijuana, the moment before the police car pulled up, the crack of a gun that turned her childhood into silence. She swallowed the memory before it could steal her voice. "Officer Cole, you are escalating without cause. This is your last warning." He laughed under his breath. "Oh, you're warning me now?" "Yes," she said. "As director of the FBI's Los Angeles field office." The sentence landed like thunder. His face drained of color. Around them, the freeway seemed to hold its breath. Even the helicopter blades above paused in their rhythm. "What did you say?" he whispered. "You heard me." For one fragile heartbeat, it looked as though he might apologize. Then his pride twisted back into defense. "Anyone can claim that. You think you scare me with some fake badge." She reached slowly into the console and lifted her identification card, letting it catch the light. The gold seal shimmered. His eyes widened. I said, "Hands where I can see them." "My hands are right here," she replied softly, palms steady on the steering wheel. "The only person reaching for danger is you." Something in her tone broke through the fog of his anger. For the first time, Harlan saw not a target, but a reflection of everything he had been trained to suppress. He lowered the gun slightly, confusion flickering behind his eyes. A radio alert crackled through his cruiser. "All units, code blue. Report of officer discharge on the interstate westbound. Director Rivera possibly on scene. Confirm immediately." His breath caught. The words Director Rivera repeated. He turned toward her again, jaw locked. "Who called that in?" "You did, officer," she said quietly, "when you fired." The truth sank in like heat. He looked around and saw nothing but camera lenses, dashboard recordings, and a rising chorus of digital witnesses. The morning had turned into a tribunal. Elena reached for her phone. "Command, this is Rivera. I need Chief Lang on the line now." Harlan took a step forward. "Hang that up." She did not. "Confirming discharge," she continued, her tone precise, the same one she used in federal testimony. He slapped the phone from her hand. It hit the pavement and skidded beneath the car. That was the moment everything crossed the line. A woman shouted, "She didn't do anything." A man yelled, "We got it all on video." The live stream spread like wildfire. In that chaos, the sun reached its peak, blinding them both. Harlan stumbled backward, covering his eyes. "I can't see," he murmured. Elena stepped out slowly, not as a victim, but as a professional who knew daylight had finally chosen sides. "Neither could my father," she said quietly. "But we're all seeing now." Traffic began to move again. Not because lanes cleared, but because the world had stopped pretending this was normal. And under that hard Los Angeles light, justice was beginning its slow rise. One frame, one witness, one truth at a time. The sound of sirens rolled toward them like a slow-moving storm. The sun was high enough now that the asphalt shimmered with heat, distorting everything above it. Cars, faces, even the truth itself. Officer Harlan Cole stood by his cruiser, eyes darting between the gun in his hand and the woman he had just threatened. His thoughts spun too fast to form words. Somewhere inward, he still believed he could fix this, that maybe if he stood taller, shouted louder, the morning would rewind, but the flashing lights growing in his rear-view mirror told him that time was over. Elena Rivera had already made the call. Her voice, calm and steady through the FBI emergency channel, filled the silence that followed the chaos. "This is Director Rivera. I am on the interstate westbound near the exit. An officer has discharged a weapon without cause. Request immediate command response." Her tone was precise, stripped of fear. She had learned long ago that panic never saved anyone. Harlan lunged forward, snatching the phone from her hand. "Who are you talking to?" he barked, pressing it against his ear, only to hear the unmistakable voice of Chief Victor Lang on the other end. "Rivera, Elena, is that you? Lang's voice cut through the static, firm but uncertain. Harlan's chest tightened. Chief. Lang paused, the seconds hanging like rope. Harlan, put your weapon down right now. The words hit harder than any bullet. Harlan's grip slackened. He turned toward Elena, his face pale. What the hell is happening? What's happening, she said quietly, is that every camera in this city just watched you draw on the wrong person. Across the divider, Mateo Santos's live stream had exploded. Comments flooded in from every corner of the country. Every second replayed from multiple angles. The image of Harlan's gun pointing toward the woman in the car was now the front page of the internet. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Reporters from early morning shows were already broadcasting live updates. Lang's convoy arrived within minutes, black SUVs and squad cars forming a semicircle around the scene. Officers stepped out cautiously, hands visible, cameras tracking every move. One of them whispered, "That's her, FBI Director Rivera." Harlan's mind fractured under the weight of realization. He staggered backward, muttering to himself, No, this isn't. I didn't know." Elena stepped forward, not in anger, but in control. "You aimed your weapon at a federal director, Officer Cole. You will surrender it now." The words, federal director, hung in the air like a sentence already passed. Chief Lang approached, his eyes unreadable behind dark glasses. He had known Harlan since the academy, had watched Harlan's father wear the same badge years earlier. Loyalty was carved deep in him, but even loyalty had limits. "Harlan," Lang said slowly, "you need to hand over your weapon." Harlan shook his head. "Chief, she provoked me. She was filming. She..." Lang's hand lifted. "Don't make this worse." For a moment, no one breathed. The sun pressed down like judgment itself. Then Harlan's knees gave way. He dropped the gun, its metallic clatter echoing off the guardrail. He sank onto the curb, face in his hands. "Oh, God," he whispered. "I didn't mean to." Elena watched without speaking. She had seen this before. Power collapsing under the weight of exposure. The difference now was that the exposure was instant, global, and irreversible. Lang turned to her, voice tight. "Director Rivera, I can't express how sorry I am." "You'll express it in your report," she replied softly. "Every word, every second, nothing omitted." "Understood." Behind them, more vehicles stopped. Journalists pressed forward from behind police tape. Someone shouted, "Director Rivera, were you targeted?" Another voice, "Was this racially motivated?" The questions blurred into noise. Elena ignored them. She glanced at her watch. The entire exchange had unfolded quickly, yet it had altered everything. She turned toward the freeway. Sunlight glinted off the cars, still backed up for miles. People inside those cars were already talking, recording, posting. The city had become a witness. Lang knelt beside Harlan, lowering his voice. "You pointed your weapon at an FBI director, son. There's no coming back from this." Harlan did not answer. His eyes were vacant, fixed on the gun lying in the dust. "I just wanted to go home," he murmured. "I didn't know who she was." "That's the problem," Lang said, almost to himself. "You didn't have to." 2 federal agents arrived to collect Elena. They guided her toward a waiting SUV, but she stopped halfway, turning to look at the man who had nearly taken her life. There was no hatred in her eyes, only a tired understanding of how easily mornings like this began. "You'll get medical clearance," she told him quietly, "and you'll face your hearing. Let the system you serve decide your fate." He did not look up. "Do you even believe it still works?" "I have to," she said. "Otherwise, none of this means anything." Lang signaled his officers. "Cuff him." As the metal clicked around Harlan's wrists, his world shrank to the sound of those cuffs and the heat on his face. Cameras zoomed in. The live stream spread even further. Commenters wrote that he looked scared now, and that it was about time. Elena sat in the back seat of the SUV. The hum of the engine was a strange comfort. Through the window, she watched Harlan being led away, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow, a man realizing too late that the line between fear and hatred had destroyed him. Her phone buzzed again. It was Isabel. She hesitated, then answered. "Mom?" The girl's voice trembled. "They're saying on the news." "I'm okay, honey," Elena interrupted softly. "It's over for now. You're on every channel." "I know." She paused, glancing at the sky, blinding blue without mercy. "Promise me you'll stay in school today." "I'm not scared, Mom," Isabel whispered. "I'm proud." The words broke something inside her. Elena pressed her hand to her chest, exhaling slowly. "Thank you, mija." When the call ended, she stared at her reflection in the glass, calm, composed, yet with eyes that carried too many mornings like this one. She whispered to herself, "It's never over. It just changes shape." Back on the freeway, Lang gave a final statement to the reporters. "An officer has been taken into custody following an unauthorized firearm discharge. The individual detained was Director Elena Rivera of the FBI. No injuries reported." The microphones caught the tremor in his voice. For years he had defended his department, believing reform could be managed quietly. But now, under sunlight and a million screens, there was no quiet left. Elena's convoy pulled away from the scene. Through the tinted glass, she saw her own name trending across news tickers. The world had already begun its judgment. As the city swallowed the scene behind her, she leaned back in her seat. The recorder on her wrist still blinked red. Every moment captured. The gun. The sky. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Morning light never lies." Harlan sat in the back of another car, wrists raw from the cuffs. He stared out the window at the Sotoul, realizing that for the first time in his life, daylight had become his punishment. The sirens fading into the distance sounded less like rescue and more like the end of everything he thought he was. By mid-morning, Los Angeles burned under a hard, pitiless sun. The interstate was open again, but its asphalt still carried the echo of that single gunshot, a sound replayed on every screen in the nation. Inside the FBI field office downtown, Elena Rivera stood in front of a wall of monitors. Each played the same footage from a different angle. The officer's gun, her calm voice, the moment sunlight flared against the barrel. She did not need to watch it, yet she could not look away. What the world now called the shot in the dawn had become the symbol of something larger than either of them. The internal probe had begun within hours. The Department of Justice had taken jurisdiction, but the FBI's own investigative unit moved even faster. Files appeared on her desk, complaints, audio logs, transcripts, 8 prior allegations against Officer Harlan Cole, 3 specifically involving Latina drivers. None had led to discipline. One memo said simply, "administrative discretion." Another file contained off-duty reports, bar fights, alcohol violations, anger management referrals. She flipped through each page slowly, her hand steady, though her pulse was not. It was not shock she felt anymore. It was recognition. Her assistant, a young analyst, entered the room quietly. "Director, we found something else." She slid a sealed USB across the table. "Private group chat logs, encrypted LAPD officers. We cracked one thread." Elena inserted the drive into her secure terminal. The first line on the screen made her chest tighten. The group name read Blue Line Patriots. The messages were filled with slurs, memes, threats, and open disdain for immigrants and journalists. Some accounts used fake names, but the cross-references were clear. Harlan's was among them. One message, sent days before the shooting, read, "Someone's got to remind these people who runs the road." She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. "This isn't bias," she murmured. "It's doctrine." By midday, the story had turned into a wildfire. The hashtag spread across every platform. Morning anchors debated motive. Experts analyzed body cam angles. Every detail of Harlan's life was now public. His divorce, his debts, even his father's disciplinary record. The LAPD's press conference at headquarters drew hundreds, but the real crowd gathered outside in the park under the fierce glare of the sun. A protest grew by the hour. Banners rippled through the heat. "Morning light on injustice. We see you now." The crowd was not angry and chaotic. It was angry and focused. College students, veterans, nurses, mothers with children perched on their shoulders, all chanting her name not as sympathy, but as symbol. Inside LAPD headquarters, Chief Victor Lang stood behind a podium, sweat beading under the television lights. He spoke carefully, each word shaped by pressure. "The department condemns any misconduct, regardless of rank. Officer Cole has been suspended pending investigation. We are cooperating fully with federal authorities." The words sounded rehearsed, but the tremor in his tone betrayed him. He knew this scandal reached deeper than one man. Elena watched the broadcast from her office, arms crossed, jaw set. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We see your daughter. She walks home from school. Be careful in the morning." She froze for the first time since the stop. Her composure cracked. "Isabel," she whispered. She called the school immediately. The secretary answered, calm but cautious. "Ms. Rivera, your daughter is safe. She's in the media studies room with staff. We've increased patrols. Keep her inside until I get there," Elena said quietly. She ended the call and stared out the window at the blinding daylight. The very light she had sworn by now felt like exposure. "They're trying to rattle me," she murmured. At the same hour, Harlan Cole sat alone in a holding cell at the downtown division. The walls glowed white under fluorescent light, harsher than sunlight, less forgiving. He had not eaten. A half-finished cup of water sat beside him, untouched. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from withdrawal. No whiskey, no cigarettes, no excuses. Just silence and consequence. He looked up when a guard walked by. "They still talking about me?" "Every channel," the guard replied. Harlan's eyes fell back to the floor. "Figures." He thought about calling someone, but there was no one left. His ex-wife had filed for divorce the moment the footage aired. His father had not spoken to him in years. The department would not touch him. The badge that once made him feel like somebody was now just an emblem of everything he had lost. Meanwhile, Elena's daughter, Isabel, was already doing what her mother feared most, stepping into the light. At 16, she sat in front of a borrowed camera in the school auditorium. "My mom taught me that sunlight shows the truth," she said, her voice calm but trembling. "Now the whole world has seen it. But if you want change, you can't just share videos. You have to show up." Her words, streamed live by classmates, reached tens of thousands by sunset. At headquarters, Chief Lang received another call, this time from the mayor's office. "We need you to control the streets, Victor. The city can't afford another moment like Ferguson." Lang sighed. "Sir, this isn't just one street anymore." He ended the call and looked at the photo on his desk, a younger version of himself and Harlan's father at graduation, both smiling in clean uniforms. "We built this wall," he whispered. "Now it's cracking in daylight." That night, news helicopters circled downtown. Protesters filled the park, candles replacing phones, silence replacing chants. On the courthouse steps, a young boy held a sign reading, "My mom's afraid of the morning." The phrase spread instantly. Elena drove home late, exhaustion clinging to her like heat. When she reached the door, 2 FBI protection agents waited outside. One handed her a tablet showing the latest social feed. "Ma'am, this message was posted an hour ago." On screen was a blurred photo of Isabel taken outside her school gate. The caption read, "The morning isn't over yet." Her stomach turned cold. She looked up at the agents. "Double Isabel's security, and I want a trace on that upload within the hour." "Yes, Director." Inside, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the same sunlight that now poured through her blinds, still merciless at dusk. She pressed play on the video Mateo Santos had uploaded earlier, the one that started it all. She watched herself again, sitting in her car, calm against the officer's rage. For the first time, she noticed something small, the reflection in the windshield, her own face lit by sunrise, unwavering. She realized this was not just her fight anymore. The city had taken ownership of it. The country had. Every mother afraid for her child, every driver pulled over without reason, every officer torn between loyalty and truth. They were all part of the same glare that refused to fade. Her phone rang again on a private line. Chief Lang's voice came through. "Elena, they're going after your kid now. You should know, those messages, they're coming from inside the department. Some of the same names from that chat." She did not flinch. "Then the morning's just beginning, Chief." There was a pause. "You're going to burn this whole city to the ground." "No," she said softly, standing by the window. "I'm going to make it look at itself in the light." Outside, downtown shimmered. Glass, sirens, sunlight, and smoke from the protests curling into the sky. The war she had spent her career avoiding had come to her doorstep, not in darkness, but in full view of the morning sun. And for the first time in her life, Elena Rivera felt what justice truly demanded. Not silence, not patience, but endurance under the glare that never turned away. The next morning, the city felt both smaller and louder. The headlines had multiplied overnight, and the sunlight was relentless, as if the day itself had volunteered to testify. Elena awoke before dawn. The house was quiet, except for the soft breathing of Isabel in the next room and the distant hum of freeway traffic. She moved through the kitchen with ritual precision. Coffee, a moment at the window to watch the light strike the palm trees, a steadying breath to remind herself that memory and present were not the same thing. She had slept poorly. Images from the day before returned in fragments. The gun, the hiss of the shot into the sky, the way Harlan's pupils had blown wide with shock. She dressed simply, no jewelry, no unnecessary color, and reviewed the stack of notes the FBI had prepared for her testimony. Her hands did not shake. That, she told herself, was all she could promise. She sat in a therapist's office downtown, a small room warmed by sunlight through blinds. The therapist was a soft-spoken woman who did not flinch at the word trauma, who had listened to soldiers and survivors and prosecutors and still kept a steady chair for the next person who needed to unburden. Elena talked, not to explain, but to unload. The smell of gasoline and morning coffee the day her father died. The strange loop of mornings that always started with promise and sometimes ended in silence. She admitted aloud that the Sioux had been her father's last witness, and that each sunrise still brought a hush in her chest. The therapist asked about coping mechanisms. Elena named them: work, clarity, the habit of calling Isabel once the city woke. But when the therapist asked about fear, she softened. "I'm afraid not of what happens to me," she said, "but what it means for my daughter, and for everyone who looks to the light for safety." They sat with that sentence until it stopped shaking. Meanwhile, Harlan Cole's morning was different in texture and tone. He woke in a cell whose walls held neither sunrise nor mercy, fluorescent lights buzzing above like interrogation. The detox came in small, cruel increments: shaky limbs, a stomach that clenched itself, the absence of the crutch that had smoothed his edges for years. He wrote an apology that morning on a folded sheet of paper and slid it under the cell door, but the words felt like counterfeit currency, too thin to pay for what he had done. His lawyer visited, face pale, and advised silence. Procedural steps, the mechanics of defense. Harlan only wanted one thing he knew he could not have: a rewind button that would let him step off the curb and walk a different line. Instead, he scrubbed his face in the sink, looked at his reflection, pale, boyish, gone, and tried to imagine a future that began with accountability rather than denial. Across town, Isabel Rivera woke into a different kind of mourning. A school auditorium packed because students and teachers had shown up to make a point. Her classmates had organized a morning town hall and filled every chair with people who wanted policies, not just headlines. Isabel stood at the front beneath a banner someone had painted in a single confident stroke. Mornings belong to everyone. She spoke with the measured cadence her mother had taught her. Clear vowels, small pauses, so listeners could feel the weight of each line. She described how mornings could be ordinary and terrifying at once, how the light that warmed breakfast tables should not be a hazard. She asked for body cameras on all patrols, for de-escalation training on every shift, for community review boards with real power. Her words were taken down, repeated, and broadcast by a local student journalist. The feed rippled outward. Parents wept quietly. A teacher wiped her eyes and mouthed proud, while Isabel kept speaking, steady as an oath. Mateo Santos, the trucker whose single stream had turned a roadside confrontation into a national mirror, was on a major network by midday. He sat in a studio with a producer who kept asking him to slow down for sound bites. Mateo obliged because the thing that had happened was simple. He had filmed what he saw. He told the anchor about the moment he decided to hit record. The twitch in the officer's jaw, the way the woman in the car did not flinch, and how he had not expected millions of people to see it. He spoke of immigrant families who lived in the city's margins and carried the same mourning fears, of friends who had been pulled aside for no reason. His voice was plain, his accent visible in the way he formed certain vowels, and millions listened to an everyman who had become a witness. Back in her kitchen, Elena watched the interview in the quiet and felt a strange kinship, a shared pulse with the man whose camera had kept her hands steady when fear sought purchase. By mid-afternoon, legislative aides were calling. Requests for Elena to testify before the state legislature arrived with polite urgency. Committees on public safety, oversight, civil rights. She accepted one that evening to speak to a joint session focused on police accountability in the days between. She reviewed transcripts, consulted attorneys, and met with advocates. She rehearsed not for performance, but for precision. She had always believed that facts could cut through rhetoric if presented cleanly and without spectacle. When the morning came for the hearing, the federal building's hearing room was full. Cameras, clergy, mothers, retired officers who had felt the sting of misguided loyalty, and dozens of students from Isabel's school who had arrived in matching shirts. Sunlight streamed through high windows in sharp bars, painting the room in strips of light and shadow. Elena's presence at the witness table was steady as a metronome. She addressed the assembly not as a celebrity, but as a professional. I am here today not to vilify a single officer, but to insist that morning light does not hide bullets. Her voice carried the small, measured breaks that made listeners lean forward. She spoke of the 8 prior complaints she had reviewed in the files, of the encrypted chat logs the FBI had uncovered, of the institutional patterns that allowed a dangerous predisposition to fester. She did not point fingers at one man so much as at the systems that had let grievance calcify into doctrine. Lawmakers took notes. Cameras captured every inflection. When a state senator asked her if reform could be imposed without destroying morale, she answered, "Reform is not destruction. It is recalibration. A badge should protect the public. When it does not, it ceases to serve." Her testimony was both legal and moral. And when she concluded, those in the room who had come to watch a spectacle found themselves unsettled by the ordinary force of her words. Outside, the protest at the Capitol grew in size and resolve. Voices calling for body cameras statewide, for a civilian oversight panel with subpoena power, for mandatory bias training and mental health resources for officers. At home that night, Elena read the letters that had arrived, some with gratitude, some with anger. She held Isabel's hand as they stood on the small front porch, the city's lights glimmering below, and felt both the weight of responsibility and the quiet assurance that action had begun. The morning had not erased scars. It had opened them to air, but when she went to bed, she did not sleep with the frantic adrenaline of the previous night. Instead, she rested with the slow fatigue of someone who had done what she could, and understood that the next steps would be long. Before sleep took her, she whispered again, as if to steady both herself and the city. "Morning light doesn't hide bullets." In the months that followed, the air over downtown Los Angeles carried the brittle clarity of late summer. Sunlight poured across the federal building, so bright that even the marble steps seemed to shimmer with judgment. Reporters lined the entrance, microphones tilted like sowers toward the doorway where Elena Rivera stepped out of a black SUV, escorted by 2 federal marshals. Cameras clicked in bursts, catching her expression, calm, composed, yet carrying the fatigue of months spent under constant light. Today was not about survival anymore. It was about accountability. Inside, the courtroom was already packed. Every bench held a mixture of agents, officers, activists, and ordinary citizens who had followed every turn of the case. At the defense table sat Harlan Cole, pale and gaunt in a dark suit that hung loose on him. Sobriety had softened his eyes, but deepened the lines on his face. His lawyer whispered quietly, but Harlan did not seem to hear. His gaze was fixed on the judge's bench, where the gold seal of the United States caught the same light that had started everything. The clerk called the session to order. The United States versus Officer Harlan Cole. Charges of reckless endangerment, unlawful discharge of a firearm, and violation of federal civil rights statutes. Elena sat behind the prosecution table, her testimony scheduled for mid-morning. From the gallery, Mateo Santos gave a small nod when their eyes met. The man whose video had ignited the case now wore a pressed shirt and a nervous smile. Somewhere beyond the marble walls, Isabel watched the live stream from her high school library, surrounded by classmates who had grown up faster than they should have. The government's opening statement was brief and cold. The prosecutor spoke not of anger, but of evidence, of a morning light that revealed what darkness had hidden. He outlined the timeline. The stop without cause, the racial slur, the warning shot into the sky, and the moment millions of Americans witnessed power without restraint. When he sat down, the courtroom felt heavier, as if the walls themselves remembered. Then came the defense. Harlan's attorney stood, clearing his throat. "My client," he began, "was blinded, not just by prejudice, as some would claim, but by the literal glare of a Los Angeles sunrise. He made a mistake, not a crime. He was afraid." The words hung limp in the air. Even the judge's pen paused mid-note. The idea that sunlight rather than choice had pulled a trigger drew murmurs from the audience. Elena was called to the stand. She took the oath with a hand that did not tremble. The prosecutor asked her to recount the events of that morning. She did so in measured language, never embellishing, never softening. "He approached with his weapon unholstered," she said. "He discharged it without provocation. I identified myself as a federal officer. He refused acknowledgement. The firearm was aimed skyward, but the danger was directed at everyone who looked like me." The courtroom was silent, except for the steady tapping of a reporter's keyboard. "Director Rivera," the prosecutor continued, "how would you summarize what happened that day?" Her answer came like a closing argument. "He didn't see a director," she said quietly. "He saw a Latina woman behind the wheel of a car, and in that instant, his perception replaced my identity. That's the real danger, not the weapon, but the vision behind it." From the back row, an older juror wiped at his eyes. Across the aisle, Lang sat rigid in his seat. He had testified the day before, admitting that 8 prior complaints had been mishandled. He had resigned that morning, his press statement ending with the words, "Loyalty must never outweigh truth." The defense cross-examination was polite but futile. "Director Rivera," the lawyer asked, Do you believe Officer Cole intended to harm you? She looked straight ahead. Intention doesn't erase impact. When the government rested its case, the evidence filled the room. Mateo's video, the FBI audio, the chat logs from the Blue Line Patriots. A digital forensic agent explained how Harlan's device had linked to extremist networks that glorified patriotic enforcement. One message in particular appeared on the large courtroom screen. Sunrise belongs to those who control it. No one spoke after that. Then Harlan asked to speak. His lawyer hesitated, then nodded. He stood slowly, adjusting his tie, eyes hollow but clear. "Your Honor," he said, "I could stand here and tell you I was scared, that I was tired, that I didn't know who she was. But the truth is, I did know what I saw. I saw a woman I didn't respect enough to protect. I saw my father's lessons instead of my own conscience, and I fired not at her, but at everything I'd been taught to fear. I can't take it back." He paused, voice shaking. "I was blinded by hate, not the sunrise." The courtroom was still. The kind of silence that comes when truth finally catches up. The judge, a woman with years in civil rights law, nodded once before speaking. "The light of day doesn't only reveal wrongdoing, Officer Cole. It also reveals whether a man is capable of facing it. I believe you are trying to." The sentence came quietly but firmly. A term in federal custody, substantial civil damages, and a lifetime ban on firearm possession and law enforcement employment. No cheers followed. Only the sound of pens scratching as clerks recorded history. As deputies led Harlan from the courtroom, sunlight poured through the tall windows, striking his face like a final spotlight. He stopped for just a moment and turned toward Elena. "Thank you," he whispered. She gave no reply, but her eyes softened, not in forgiveness, but in recognition of the weight he now carried. Outside, cameras flared, microphones extended. The crowd was a sea of faces, hungry for answers. Elena stepped to the podium briefly, flanked by Justice Department officials. "This isn't about one man or one department," she said. "It's about the distance between power and humanity, and how sunlight must bridge it." Reporters shouted questions about Isabel, about the threats, about reform. She answered only one. "Will this change anything?" She looked toward the horizon, where the freeway shimmered in the heat. "Change isn't a miracle," she said quietly. "It's a habit, and today Los Angeles practiced it." That afternoon, as the courthouse emptied, Mateo stood outside, watching the crowd disperse. He texted Isabel one line. "Your mom won." Isabel replied, "No, justice did." Inside his cell, Harlan sat on his narrow bed, hands clasped, staring at the rectangle of sunlight. He whispered the words the judge had said and let them settle into the silence. The light of day reveals all. For the first time, he did not look away, and far above the city, the same sun that had witnessed violence now poured over glass towers and freeways, unblinking, impartial, relentless, as if to remind everyone beneath it that justice, once awakened, does not sleep through the morning anymore. When the sun rose again over Los Angeles, it did not feel like an ordinary morning. The city seemed quieter, its noise wrapped in reflection. The story that had begun on the shoulder of the interstate was now etched into the nation's conscience. Inside the federal prison, Harlan Cole awoke to the sound of a distant bell and the low shuffle of inmates preparing for roll call. He had stopped counting the days. His world had shrunk to a gray routine. Work detail, counseling, meals, sleep. Yet within that confinement, something had softened. The first months had been rage and denial, then silence, and now a strange stillness. He joined the rehabilitation program not to redeem himself, but because he no longer trusted the man he used to be. In group therapy, when a counselor asked him to define justice, he said quietly, "It's light, and it burns." The other inmates laughed at first, but he did know. By the time his suspended portion began, he had become the one others asked to speak for them during sessions. When he was released, he left with a box of letters from strangers, some condemning, some forgiving, all reminders that consequence could outlive guilt. He would later take a quiet job at a rural halfway house, speaking to new officers about bias, the kind that hides behind fear. He lived simply, alone, never granting interviews. His name was still known, but his voice no longer carried authority. Only warning. Back in Los Angeles, director Elena Rivera found herself in a new season of light. Her book, Sunlight on the Freeway, had become a national bestseller, not because of scandal, but because it refused to sensationalize it. It was a memoir written in her precise, measured tone, a reflection on policy, pain, and the danger of silence. The royalties she refused to keep were turned into the Morning Light Initiative, a statewide program to retrain officers in cultural literacy, de-escalation, and transparency. Within a year, thousands of California officers had completed its workshops. Departments from other states began to visit Los Angeles to observe, not to criticize. Elena led the first session herself, standing before a room of recruits as sunlight slanted through the blinds. Every morning, she told them, you're given a choice to see clearly or to look away. Only one builds trust. Some took notes, others just listened. And as she spoke, the tone of the city began slowly to change. Isabel Rivera, now 17, was standing taller too. Her viral town hall had made her a youth figure in civic reform, though she carried it with quiet grace. That spring she received a scholarship to study law under a new justice education fund, the first in her family to go. When she gave her acceptance speech, she mentioned her mother only once, but the words lingered. She taught me that fear doesn't shrink in the dark. It shrinks when you face it in daylight. The audience rose to their feet, and Elena, sitting in the back row, felt tears form, not from pride, but from relief that her daughter's mornings would be different. Across California, the ripples of that case continued to spread. The state assembly passed the Morning Light Act, mandating body cameras on all patrols, external auditing of disciplinary boards, and public access to complaint data. Media headlines were measured now, not outrage, but progress. Even Chief Lang, retired but still active in policy circles, spoke publicly about the price of silence. Leadership, he told a symposium, isn't about protecting your own. It's about protecting what's right, even when it's inconvenient. His words carried more weight than he expected. For the first time in years, police unions began requesting training instead of resisting it. And then there was Mateo Santos, the truck driver who had unknowingly recorded history. He had bought a modest home near East Los Angeles with the network stipend he earned from his footage. But what mattered more was the non-profit he launched, Drive for Truth. It trained commercial drivers to use dashboard cameras to report misconduct and protect the innocent. He liked to joke that he was still in traffic, only this time it mattered. On the wall of his small office hung a framed still from that fateful video. Sunlight over asphalt, a woman calm behind a windshield, an officer frozen mid-motion beneath it. He had written a single line. Justice starts when someone decides to record, even if their hands shake. Years later, the city honored Elena at a quiet ceremony downtown. There were no banners, no parades, just a bronze plaque installed near the exit, marking the place where the story began. The inscription read, "Here, in the morning light of Los Angeles, truth was recorded. Courage was tested, and reform began." She stood before it, the same stretch of freeway now peaceful under a pale sky. Isabel held her hand. Cameras flashed. Traffic hummed softly behind them. When reporters later asked if she had ever forgiven Harlan Cole, she paused before answering. "Forgiveness isn't the point," she said. "Accountability is. Sometimes justice means learning to carry the memory without letting it carry you." That night, back home, she found a letter in her mailbox. No return address, just a faint signature. She recognized the handwriting. Inside was a folded note. "Thank you for not letting the morning end." She read it once, then placed it back in the envelope, unopened, beyond that line. Some things, she knew, were better left in the light, not the past. The next day, she drove the interstate again early, before the city fully woke. The traffic lights blinked amber, and the sky glowed soft gold over the horizon. Her hands rested steady at 10 and 2, the same as that morning years ago. The radio played a quiet news segment. All California patrols now fully equipped with body cam compliance. She smiled faintly, eyes on the road ahead at the overpass. Sunlight flared against her windshield, warm and familiar for the first time. It didn't sting. It felt like peace. And somewhere in that reflection, the freeway, the dawn, the silence before the city stirred, lived the truth she had earned, that even after the burn, the morning always returns. Justice may stumble through shadows, but it never forgets its way back to the light. Thank you for watching this story. Every view, every comment, every share helps keep the fight for justice alive. If this story moved you, subscribe, leave a like, and share it forward.